Hey everybody, welcome into the Sideline Intel NBA podcast. I'm Jeff Griffith, joined by Jacob Rosenfarb to break down all things NBA coming out of the bubble in Orlando. We're doing this under the heading of sidelineintel.com. Be sure to check out all the content on there across all sports. Good content 24/7 coming out of that site. Also follow at Sideline Intel on Twitter. But for today, it's basketball podcasting. It's me, Jeff Griffith, my guy Jacob Rosenfarb on the other end. We're just going to break down, like I said, everything going on in the bubble. As you may have seen on the website, our trailer is out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. You can get it on the site as well. And today is our first official episode, breaking down everything. So first off, I guess we'll introduce ourselves. Like I said, I'm Jeff Griffith. Grew up in the Philly area, big basketball guy. Love college hoops, especially, but got into the NBA over the years. And like I said before, I'm here with Jacob Rosenfarb. Jacob, what do you got?
Jeff, my name is Jacob Rosenfarb. Like Jeff said, I'm from San Diego, California. We didn't initially include our favorite teams, but I'll start. I'm a big Laker guy, so like to keep what's going on there, but also league as a whole. Always been interested in the league as a whole, and like you said, not quite the big college basketball fan that Jeff is, but have my picadillos. But Jeff, how about yourself? Tell us about your basketball fandom.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up a Syracuse fan in college. I love the college game. I love the national landscape. I'm big into bracketology, and I do that on the side for Sideline Intel. As far as the NBA is concerned, which we're going to be mostly focusing on, especially because it is being played, I've become somewhat of a Sixers fan over the years, coming from the Philly area. It's a fun young team. I always kind of had like a for the Sixers, but I've definitely become more of a fan since kind of getting more into the NBA game in like my high school years and college. Speaking of which, we both went to Arizona State. We're about a year out of college, both of us, just to kind of give you some perspective. Well, I'm a year out of college, Jacob about a few months out of college, but just to give you some perspective on who we are, where we come from. But enough about that. This is not about us. This is about basketball. So we're going to dive right in. Jacob, I know the biggest thing on your ledger right now is the 1 seeds. So why don't you start us off and give us your take on how they're looking?
Thank you, Jeff, for that. I think coming into the bubble, there was sort of a consensus around the NBA community that there was two set determinants of these conference championships. It was going to be Milwaukee in the East, and it was going to be one of the two Los Angeles teams in the West. This was, like I said, a kind of foregone conclusion in many basketball analysts' mind, and in some, why are we even headed to the bubble? I think after a week of bubble play, we can say definitively that a Bucks Los Angeles finals is out of the question. I think we've seen enough. We've seen enough turmoil. We've seen enough uncertainty in terms of just how these games are played and the atmosphere that the bubble has created, that I feel confident saying that chalk is completely out of the question. I feel very confident in saying that the idea that the favorites just going to run out, to me, seems preposterous. What are your thoughts on that, Jeff?
I tend to agree, and I think we can touch more on this going forward, but I think one thing we've definitely seen is that I think oftentimes in the NBA, especially during a normal regular season, you see the law of large numbers win out. Like, what's supposed to happen usually happens. And I think a lot of that's because the season is long and it's a marathon. And oftentimes when you have that big of a sample size and teams have to grind and guys get hurt and whatnot, the best teams will always rise above in that scenario. That's why we haven't seen an 8 seed or a 7 seed win a playoff series in like 9 years. It's just the fact of the matter that especially the NBA, and especially when you only have 5 dudes on the floor, there's just not a big enough not a big enough margin for error to the point where we see a lot of parity. I mean, I think that goes without saying, especially if we look at a league that's had the same championship 3 of the last 4 years or whatever, however many years it is. I can't even remember at this point exactly. But that being said, I think when you get it into the bubble, you see all the variables are gone. Teams can play to their ceiling because they're not exhausted. They're not injured. They're not traveling. They're just there. And they have the opportunity to just play their best basketball. And so we can touch on that more, but I think one of the biggest reasons I feel like I would not feel comfortable locking in a Milwaukee Lakers or Milwaukee Clippers finals is just because we finally have variables. Or I should say, because we don't have variables, we have the chance for variable outcomes. Does that make sense? We don't have influencing variables. therefore we can have unexpected outcomes, I think.
It's just hoops at this point. End of the day, I think I forget which credible NBA player said this, but like at the beginning of the bubble, they said this is where the real hoopers are going to show out. This is the time. I think that's why we've seen players like TJ Warren really have a great bubble showing, just because this environment really incentivizes guys who have concrete skill sets, who know what they are, who are going to put in the work and are kind of have their niche and are able to expand off that. I think, like I just said, with someone like TJ Warren, we knew he was an elite. We knew he was a good scorer. Maybe we didn't think he was quite the elite scorer he's been so far in Orlando. But when you have the time to kind of work on your craft, when you're healthy, when all the chips are off the table to a certain extent, somebody like TJ Warren really has a chance to elevate their game to a level that we really didn't think was possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's just one perfect example of kind of the stuff we're seeing, where now that guys are in this bubble atmosphere, with just nothing influencing them but basketball, you're seeing potential come to life.
Exactly.
And that's for better and for worse. And I think one of the things we're seeing come to life now that there's variables have been taken away is we're seeing the flaws in the, as you said on our trailer, the historically good Bucks. We're seeing flaws in what a team that has won, is it 53 games, 58 games at this point?
Something I've seen, yeah, something. I mean, yeah, record-setting to a certain. I mean, their offensive efficiency was one of the top 5 marks of all time. Their point differential was in the top 5 marks of all time by any historic margin. This is a historically relevant offense and a unquestioned championship, favorite. Favorite is underselling it based on historical precedents. But like you just said, like we've seen in Orlando, so much. Not so that may be overvalued, but a significant amount of Milwaukee's wins came from just pure overwhelming the opponent. They have a player in Giannis who is unlike any other player in the league. You can't really game plan for Giannis, and in a 48-minute structure of just kind of a dot in the larger picture, that's so overwhelming that on a normal regular season night, it's hard to contain. But in a more bubble setting where the games are more important and the ability to game plan and the ability to really sort of focus in on one player becomes heightened, we've seen Giannis have to adjust his game to a certain extent. He's been just as efficient, but he has to rely so much more on his teammates. And while they have created a deeper bench than last year's struggles, notable additions like George Hill and Marvin Williams, I still questions persist for me about the long-term reliability of those type of shooters. I think like we saw in Houston's 0 for 27, 2 years ago, shooters are not quite as reliable, I think, as we'd like to think. I think a 40% shooter in the regular season can very quickly become a 30% shooter in the postseason. And that gap is the difference between a second-round exit and an NBA Finals.
And what never goes away, I feel like, is defense. And we'll touch on that later with Toronto Raptors, who I think match up well for that reason. But you talked about the level of play just kind of anteing up in terms of teams going against the Bucks, because all the games matter more now. All these games are preparing for the finals. And I think we've seen that across the board, that every team there has something to play for right now for the most part, especially the teams that aren't 1 seeds. Like the Lakers clinched. They don't really have a ton to play for except preparation. But like something's on the table for everybody there. And to the point where we're seeing teams play their best basketball, because unlike March, no one's tired and everyone has something to play for. So all the motivations are sky high. So you mentioned teams therefore playing the Bucks as best they can, as opposed to a regular season night wherein they can be overwhelmed by the Giannis factor. Now it's their one focus in a very key game, and they're going to hone in. They're going to take the extra effort to hone in on not fixing that, but stopping that variable.
100%.
The one thing I'll say though, in response to that, and I say this just to play devil's advocate for maybe the Bucks aren't struggling to the degree we think they might be, is if anyone doesn't have anything to play for in the East, it is Milwaukee.
Definitely.
And we did see they rested their starters against Brooklyn in that loss, but they didn't rest their starters that much against Miami. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, definitely not.
So how much stock do you put into the idea that they're not playing 100% while everybody else is?
I think that's a great point. I think that's a very fair point and would explain a kind of shocking loss to Brooklyn.
That was weird.
Chris Chiozza, baby. Chris Chiozza fan club starts now.
Hold on. I have to stop you for a second because a few days ago I asked you who you wanted to get the 9 seed, and you told me Portland, or who you wanted to see in the Eastern Conference playoffs, and you told me you did not want to see Chris Chiozza in the playoffs.
No part of Chris Chiozza. I want no part of Chris Chiozza, but he's a beast. That's all we're gonna say about that. But so no, Milwaukee certainly has had their falters throughout this bubble, I think, in some extent. But I think your point is well made that they certainly have the least amount to fight for. But I don't know. The game I saw versus Miami last night was certainly not a team that was taking this time off. This was not a team. I think they see the opportunity that lies ahead of them, and the last season's playoff loss to Toronto, I assume, lies heavy in their mind. I think because a lot of the strategies that we're talking about in terms of relying on shooters, that was Toronto's entire strategy. That was they packed the paint and they said Dante DiVincenzo, Wesley Matthews, beat us. We dare you. And so I think that's going to be every team's strategy until someone proves them wrong. And so, the Bucks obviously know that that's the league's worst kept secret. And so, part of this bubble has been preparing for that, but there's only so much preparation I feel like you can do before it becomes playoff time and before that intensity, ramps up.
Right. Absolutely. Let's hone in though on this Bucks Heat game. Just to kind of diagnose, the Nets game is an outlier to me. Losing to the Nets isn't good, but they didn't play their stars the whole game. Like, I'm not looking at that Nets game for answers because I think the Nets game is what raised the questions, but we're like, okay, they didn't play their starters. They're probably playing down to the competition. I get it. Now they're playing a top 4 seed and the starters played, like Giannis played, look at the stats here, 30 minutes, which isn't a ton, but it's a good chunk of the game. So I feel like this is the game where we can actually look at it and be like, okay, what went wrong here that we could see being a trend now that they did it in a full game against a quality team. They shot the ball pretty well. They shot 40% from 3.
Yeah. I want to preface it by saying let's not overreact and go say what went wrong per se. But they still won by 14. But there's some issues in that game that will be
the important thing to remember is that they won by 14. But if basketball is a 40-minute game, they lose. Like they turned it on. Like I remember I had the game on here at home, and it was the Heat were leading, and it was maybe early fourth quarter, and the Bucks were in it, but they didn't look like. I was pretty ready to lock in the Heat were going to win, and then the Bucks outscored the Heat.
The Heat were up by 23, I think, mid-second. You know what I mean? This was a substantial beatdown for much of this game. The Heat looked like the much better team.
Yes, and
without Jimmy Butler.
Yes, without Jimmy Butler too. That's an important point to remember here that they did not have Jimmy Butler on the floor. But the Bucks outscored the Heat by 20 in the fourth and 11 in the third. So I guess the question therein lies: what did the first 3 quarters look like? The fourth quarter didn't.
I think the first 3 quarters, from my personal evaluation, a lot of the Miami's early offense ran through Bam Adebayo. I think that to me is the core of the. I'm not breaking any minds here. With Bam Adebayo is the core of the Heat offense. Things are going even when Jimmy Butler's back. Much of the Heat offense is going to run through Bam Adebayo and his unique ability to facilitate from the high post. I really do think that his sort of ability to rise tides above him, the ability to generate offense for players like Duncan Robinson, like Tyler Hero, like Kendrick Nunn, has an ability to elevate, like I said, players around him, and that includes Jimmy Butler when he comes back. And so my point is that what we saw in the first 3 quarters was a more kind of coalescing team, a team that fit better within itself. Come fourth quarter, I think they got a little worried about shot creation and about creating for themselves, and it just natural regression. I think they shot exceptionally well in the start of the game, and then come fourth quarter, some of that luck may have ran out a little, but I still like the ethos of what I'm saying is that I'm very encouraged by what I saw from Miami last night, and I think some of the successes they had in the first half is easily replicable come playoff time.
Definitely, and I think this is also worth mentioning in that vein, like to piggyback off of you, that I feel like oftentimes, and you've watched more playoffs than I have, and more playoff games than I have, and that's an understatement, but I still feel like, generally speaking, in a regular playoffs, players win in the playoffs. like dudes, like individuals win. That's why LeBron's been all these finals with random teams. You know, that's why he dragged that team of Rodney Hoods to the finals one year. But I feel like we keep talking about this bubble where teams can play to their full potential, and you see a more of an unaffected sample, an unaffected by outside influences sample. I feel like this is a year where teams will win in the playoffs. And I feel like the only player in the East that feels like he's equipped to be that player winning in the playoffs would be Giannis. But I feel like everyone else is good because they're a strong built team. Not that the Bucks aren't, but like the Raptors are good because they're a built team. You mentioned the Heat. I feel like the Pacers don't. The Pacers have go-to guys, and they're not a great team. They're not amazing, but they're competitive and they're in the Eastern Conference top half conversation because they work well together. Guys like Oladipo, Sabonis, etc. Brogdon being another example. T.J. Warren. This team fits. We'll get to the Sixers and why that's a whole other question mark. Because they feel like a team that should be player-led to playoff success, but their team fit seems to be what's killing them, even though they're only a game behind Indiana. But that's for later. The point I'm trying to make here, and I'm rambling, is that I feel like team building is going to win, at least, especially in the East in these playoffs.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's a great point. I think teams, but I also think coaching. I think we can't understate the value of great coaching. And I think in the bubble, we're seeing the difference. We're seeing that gap widen even farther between who are the truly elite coaches and what coaches are kind of just kind of rolling the ball out there and saying, go get them, guys. And so I think that difference is really going to illuminate itself come playoff time. And that is part of the reason I have such trouble sort of dissing the Bucks, is that I believe in Mike Budenholzer. I believe in the system that they've created, but building off the point you said about players winning come playoff time, that is my concern with Milwaukee. Is not that Giannis is unprepared, but the structure that we've just been talking about and his game style relies heavily on other players. His game style relies heavily on drawing in the defense and relying on others to make them pay for that. He's as talented as Giannis is. A crowded paint is similar to Shaq. I think when we're talking about Giannis historically, we really can only compare him to the great centers of the league. It doesn't do us a whole lot of help to compare him to great forwards, when in reality he is our generation's Shaq. And the rant on Shaq, for the deal on Shaq for a while, was pack the paint and make others beat you. And that has been the strategy with Giannis, and it is yet to fail. And it's yet to really bite the other team in the butt. And so come playoff time, I believe in Giannis individually, but I worry about his ability to create shots for himself. I'm very confident in his ability to create shots for others. I still worry about his ability to create shots for himself. And that's why come playoff time, I believe in Jimmy Butler more than I believe in Giannis Antetokounmpo. I think Jimmy Butler's ability to get to the line, his ability to expand the floor, and I think make somebody guard him. Not that people aren't guarding Giannis on the three-point line, but the reality is that Jimmy Butler, despite his poor statistics this season, is still a more reliable outside shooter than Giannis Antetokounmpo. And I believe in his ability to create higher efficiency shots for himself and for others than Giannis come playoff.
I think that's a fair point. Do you think, though, that he is the most equipped playmaker in the East right now in a playoff scenario?
The most equipped? That's an interesting question.
Because I feel like you'd think Giannis at number one on that ranking. But if you've got Jimmy above Giannis,
I think I do. I don't think. I mean, yeah, I in a perfect world, I get a NBA 2K, I might take like Ben Simmons, you know what I mean? If I'm just taking pure talent, but in this real world we're living in, where Jimmy Butler, my friend was watching the game last night, and he texted me, Jimmy Butler gets every freaking call, and it's the reality. There are few people more efficient in the league at deceiving the referees and about getting those ticky-tack fouls to get them to the line. Game on the line, there are few people I trust more to get to the line than Jimmy Butler.
I think that's a totally fair point. And we mentioned this in the trailer, but you've been high on these Heat for a while. And I think I'm with you. It took me a while to become a believer, just because when I heard the names, like, as someone who, until maybe a couple of years ago, liked but didn't love the NBA. Like I wasn't like ingrained in the NBA. Like I have been more so this season and last, but maybe like 3 or 4 years ago, like NBA was something I just followed. It wasn't something I really like dug into. And so a name like Bam Adebayo being like your second best starter did not sound intriguing to me. That didn't sound championship caliber to me. But like, and then from there, guys like Tyler Hero and Kendrick Nunn, like these wouldn't be headline names entering this season. This roster did not look top 4 to the naked eye entering the 2019-20 season.
I mean, Kendrick Nunn was a nobody. Kendrick Nunn was yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And for that reason, it took me a while to buy in. But you've been high on these Heat, so props to you is my point. Just props to you for that take. That's a good take.
I appreciate that. But even I didn't see, like I said, Kendrick Nunn's leap. I mean, Kelly Olynyk is shooting 44% from 3 this season. Didn't see that coming. I mean, they've just, but I believed in Eric Spoelstra. I believe in the infrastructure that they built there. And I don't know, come playoff time, those are the type of things I'm willing to place my belief in.
Yeah. I look at the Heat roster and I think about like when I look at a team roster as a fan, like I naturally am like, is that guy going to beat me? Is that guy going to beat me? Like, and I look at like the Bucks, I'm like, Giannis, all right, he's going to beat me. So I got to neutralize him. Chris Middleton, he can beat me. And I go down the list from there. I look at the Heat roster and like last night's roster, like forget Jimmy. And like, I wouldn't to the naked eye say any of those dudes are going to beat me. Like none of them are look like the guy that I need to worry about. They just play well together. You mentioned Olynyk. You mentioned, we've mentioned a couple of guys on this podcast. Derek Jones, another, guy who really hasn't been like a league stud, but he's a perfect role player on this team. He's doing a great job. And what did he have last night? I have the box score. Derek Jones contributed 3 of 4, 12 points, 4 rebounds, 15 minutes. That's for the fourth guy off your bench or third guy off your bench. Come on.
Tried to end Chris Middleton's life. I don't know if you saw that.
Yes.
That was incredible.
Truly incredible. Before we get too lost on the Heat, though, I do gotta ask you. There's so many more storylines, and as much as we love the Heat, a team who really feels like the exact antithesis of what the Heat have been this year is the Sixers. And so before we leave the East, because the East's race for the 8th seed is irrelevant. The Wizards are the 10th seed right now. We gotta hone on these Sixers. I mean, for a little context, they lost to Indiana when T.J. Warren dropped 50+ without Victor Oladipo. They skated by the Spurs on a Shake Milton buzzer beater. They escaped the Wizards by like 10. And so now here they are sitting in about a half game out of the 5 seed behind Indiana. But Ben Simmons looks to be out indefinitely for as many as 4 to 6 weeks. You even opined that he might just miss the playoffs at this point. Sixers.
It's not looking great, I think, with somebody of such potential of Ben Simmons. I really can't imagine a forward-thinking front office like the 76ers trotting their guy out there at not 100%. So I worry we're not going to see Ben Simmons again. But I think this will be slightly irrelevant by the time this drops. But Orlando, Philadelphia tonight, I think will teach us a lot. I think Orlando is a well-constructed team. I like Vukovic. I like they just have pieces that I like. They're not a fully coherent team yet, but they'll present some problems for Philadelphia, and more importantly, see what kind of lineups we're going to see without Simmons. Because to me, that is the holy grail here. That is the not antithesis. What is it? How do I put this? The potential of the Sixers without either Simmons or Embiid to me is their highest potential ceiling. I think we've seen what the Sixers look like with both Embiid and Simmons, and I think we've seen the cap. That potential has been capped. Now, with the basketball gods sort of parting the river, so to speak, for Embiid to be that kind of, the built around a center team is what we kind of want to see with Embiid. This is is Embiid surrounded by 4 shooters is basically what I'm getting to. The idea of a unit built around Embiid, a strategy built around Embiid is what I'm curious to see tonight against Orlando and moving forward.
I absolutely agree. And the last time we watched this team for an extended period of time without one of those two, pretty sure they ripped off 15 straight. Remember that? Yeah. And at the end of, I want to say it was 2017-18, The year it was the first year that Embiid and Simmons really started to click. And like the Sixers started to like actually take shape as what we thought they could be. And they just shot up to the 3 seed because they won their last like 15 games. And Embiid was out. And then he came back with the mask and they beat the Heat, lost to the Celtics in the second round, but that's a whole other story. But like 15 in a row. So clearly the Sixers seem to make more sense when you focus on one of those dudes because they're both incredible talent. But it just seems like, I don't know why, because you would think, okay, I don't want to perpetuate this narrative because I think it's way overblown, but I think relative to specifically this Sixers team, if Simmons had a shot, him and Embiid would make a ton of sense. But I think the fact that he has to score around the rim, he can facilitate and run the offense, which is, I think, the best part of his game. The way he handles the ball and facilitates is magical to watch. It's incredible to see unfold on the screen. But the fact that he has to score around the rim too, I feel like does not mesh with Embiid. And if he had a shot, I think they'd mix really well. I think Simmons can still be an incredible player without a shot because, I mean, he's already been an all-star without one. I mean, come on. And he's like still in his like third year in the NBA. But I think that's part of the reason those two just aren't clicking because they can't space from each other. They have to get theirs at the rim. Honestly, Embiid's better away from the rim than Simmons is as a scorer. The guy hit fadeaways the other night.
Yeah. So no, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think in reality, Simmons and Embiid sadly play the same position. They both need to be around the rim. They both need to, have the ball in their hands to create offense, and all that really happens around the rim. And just they are an incompatible pairing, as unfortunate as it's been. And I think that problem is accentuated by Brett Brown and some sort of archaic ideas about how stars should play together and sort of the processing of minutes and how that process goes. I would like to see a little more creativity from Brett Brown. And maybe, like I said, without Simmons, now is the perfect time to be creative, try some different lineups. But the idea now of crafting lineups around Embiid, where Embiid is your 5, Tobias Harris is your 4, and you surround Embiid with shooting, is both a strategy that we've seen be productive in the past, and in theory makes perfect sense for Embiid. Embiid, in theory, seems like the perfect player to surround with 4 shooters. He is an above-average passer. He is a mobile. He's a rim runner. He does a lot of the things you want out of the modern big. And so the idea of surrounding him with 4 shooters and kind of building a team more around him suggests to me that this Sixers team, while we're so down on them right now, could have a massive resurgence come playoff time.
Well, I mean, any Sixers fan is going to be excited to hear that, especially I think general common, what's the word? Like conventional wisdom says the Sixers are trending down into the playoffs. The notion, though, that they make more sense focused around Embiid is encouraging if you're a Sixers fan. I also, though, feel like outside of the stars, I don't know if I think this is the worst they've structured a team around the two of them since getting the two of them. The team that I think made the most sense had Bellinelli and Ilyasova and Redick. That team and McConnell, like that team made a lot of sense because you had guys who could do specific things, shoot, and Covington was a good piece on those teams. Sorry, those were underrated pieces that they had to give up to get more star power. But now you're seeing teams like we mentioned, the 8th man on the Heat contributing. I'm not saying Derek Jones is better than the 8th man per se on the Sixers, but like the Sixers 5 through 8 right now is way worse than it was the last 2 years. And I think Tobias was worth what they gave up to get him, but I think what they've built behind him, Al Horford.
Yeah.
Al Horford is a good player, but on a team that's already got Embiid and Simmons, and the money they threw at him, that just baffles me. But it's the role players that concern me if I'm a Sixers fan. Like I have been underwhelmed by the likes of, Alec Burks, Shake Milton. I love Matisse Thybulle. and Shake's had his moments. But I don't know if they've built a team around Simmons and Embiid that is built to bring out their best qualities.
I think that's the perfect way to put it. The qualities that they would like to accentuate from Simmons and Embiid are not exactly enhanced. And the problem is, I don't want to crap on the Sixers front office too much because I do think, in theory, like Josh Richardson, in theory, makes a lot of sense. That he just hasn't been to the quality that I kind of expected from him. Al Horford, again, in theory, it kind of there's some thinking. I don't know. It's a little flawed. I think a good principle of free agency is that you need to be able to sign guys who can play with your best players. And I think even a basketball simpleton could have told you that Horford, Simmons, and Embiid is not a long-term trio. But I worry about the depth, like you just said. As intriguing as some of their pieces are, as much as I like somebody like Furkan Korkmaz or Shake Milton, like it's not the type of depth. And maybe this all comes down to coaching. End of the day, maybe we would be looking at these players differently if they were in a better system. But end of the day, you're stuck with who you got. And Brett Brown, I have little faith in Brett Brown. It doesn't feel like there's a system. It doesn't feel like there's a coherent identity of this team. And end of the day, that's what I'm really looking for from my coach, is to set a tone, is to bring a group of players who may not naturally mesh together, to bring them together. And I haven't really seen that from Brett Brown.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's the one thing I was struck by watching the last couple of games is just there was never a point in the game where it felt like they knew what they were doing, and then they kept doing it. Like there were like great stretches where they like had some semblance of confidence and playing to a specific style, and then they just lost it. Like they never had it wasn't consistent. And so I think we're in agreement here that something's wrong in the DNA of this team. It's not the guys on the floor, it's the DNA. And I think that's going to be a question that needs to be addressed in the offseason. But we may see – I think to kind of wrap this in a bow and get back to your original point, if they play well without Simmons and Embiid shines and the guys around him shine as a result, that tells us a lot about what this offseason should look like going forward. But we are about – not to shut us down on that topic, but we are about half an hour into the podcast so far, and we haven't really touched the West. So I'll ask you, Jacob, what's the most intriguing thing to you about the West? Is it the bunch of middle teams between like the 3 and 6 or 3 and 7? Is it this crazy race for 8, or is it our LA teams at the top?
I think there's so many jumping off points. We'll start with, I think, kind of what's on everybody's mind in terms of the Lakers faltering. The Lakers have not looked strong. They've been the worst team in the bubble by most metrics. They're the only team to average under 100 points. They, I think, are 1-3 now. This has not been an impressive showing for Los Angeles, and a lot of that sadly stems on Danny Green. And this is the problem when you rely heavily on role players around. When you build your team star heavy and just hope the rest will fall into place, is that your playoff hopes come pinned on Danny Green. And so as Danny Green has struggled in the bubble, and the Lakers as a result have really not been able to recover to their post-bubble standards in terms of, we're going to play off LeBron in the post, we're going to play off AD in the post, and we're going to rely on our shooters to provide some balance. And whether that's been Contavious Caldwell-Pope, whether that's been Danny Green, whether that's been Alex Caruso, they have relied on they have done more guard by community, guard by group. They have not, as the loss of Avery Bradley to not even come to the bubble was a huge one, because they were just kind of throwing a bunch of crap at the wall and seeing what stuck. And so as that crap begins to fall, and less crap is stuck, the playoff chances of this Lakers team continue to dwindle. And so I'm curious to see if Danny Green's resurgence can kind of just come at a snap of the fingers, or if this is a long-term issue of where somebody's hit a wall. But either way you look at it, the Lakers have some serious depth problems, have some serious issues they need to work out. And while they've clinched the 1 seed, a first-round matchup against either Portland or New Orleans is far from a walk in the park. Each of those teams presents some real troubles. Portland specifically, if I was a Lakers fan, I would be, and I am a Lakers fan, I would be incredibly worried about Portland.
Yeah, absolutely.
Charles Barkley already said this publicly. He picked the Trailblazers over Lakers round 1. If I was as bold as Charles Barkley, I would do it as well. But like the Lakers have absolutely no one to guard Damian Lillard. I think that is that's about as clear as it gets. I think there's without Avery Bradley, with Danny Green and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope not at their full strength, Damian Lillard presents a massive, massive problem for the Lakers. And a tough first-round matchup is not what this team needs. Because as a Houston looms, who has presented massive issues for the Lakers. Denver looms, who has not been an easy matchup for the Lakers. There are plenty of landmines in the West that would bring us back to our earlier point of Los Angeles, Milwaukee is out the window.
I absolutely agree with you, and I think I'm looking at the box score now, and it's striking to see the drop off after Anthony Davis and maybe after Kyle Kuzma, because Kyle Kuzma is a good third player. But even then, I'm going to ask you this, Jacob, and I don't know if I necessarily think this, but my mind's going there, so I want to toss this out into the ether here. When you're talking about the best three players on a team, where do the Lakers rank in the West when you combine the talent of their best three?
I still think they're high. I don't want to get too down on the Lakers, but if we're saying in reality, Kyle Kuzma or Danny Green as your third best player for championship contender is typically not a recipe for success. As incredible as Anthony Davis and LeBron James are, the stark realities are that come playoff time, you're going to have to rely on the deeper members of your bench, and a player like Kyle Kuzma does not exactly have the pedigree of a established playoff scorer. Like say even somebody like Houston, who while they're top heavy with Westbrook and Harden, they still have Robert Covington, they still have Eric Gordon, they still have a little bit more of established pieces, than the Lakers. Even a team like the Nuggets, what a team like the Nuggets lack in top tier quality, they make up for in bounty with depth. They still have, if we're doing top three with them, Jokic, and then probably Jamal Murray. And then right after that, you can throw in Jeremy Grant. You can throw in Paul Millsap. You can throw in, Michael Porter Jr., who has been having an incredible bubble season. I mean, the depth that a lot of these top-tier Western Conference teams have cannot be matched by the Lakers. And when the few pieces of what you thought were consistent depth, like Danny Green, are faltering, then the house of cards that you've built very quickly comes falling down.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think one more question I have to ask on this Lakers team that popped into my head. Generally speaking, on the terms of the answers, I agree with you. Otherwise, I would go further into my own take. But another question that comes to mind here is, would the Lakers right now be better with LeBron surrounded by the likes of Hart, Ingram, Lonzo, that they gave up to get AD? I'm not saying they shouldn't have gotten AD. It's AD. But would they be better right now with talent to that level surrounding just LeBron?
It's a very fair question. The question kind of very similar to that, but slightly different, that I've always asked myself is, was the ability to keep Lonzo Ball available for the Lakers? If they had the ability to do the same trade except Kuzma instead of Lonzo, could they have done that? Because to me, in my mind, that just makes way, because Lonzo to me is the missing piece to a certain extent. He is a excellent on-ball defender. He is a better floor spacer, and he gets the ball out of his hands quickly. Those are three things that when you're playing with LeBron are just absolutely crucial. And while Kuzma's development has been fun to watch, and he's been solid, he's been really nice in the bubble. He's been that kind of floor spacer that they need. He likes the ball in his hands a lot, and he keeps it there even when surrounded by players like LeBron and AD. And he's an evolving defender. He's an improving defender for sure. But he's not going to take on the likes of Kawhi or Paul George. He's not going to take on the type of quality wings that you'd like from your number one wing defender, not named LeBron. So that's I kind of avoided your question, but I still think that I'd much rather have LeBron and AD and figure the rest out later. But I do think there were some issues in just staying kind of pat at this roster. They tried to sign Darren Collison, that failed. I get that. But there were still – point guard is by far the deepest position of the league. And to me, if you're still trotting out guys like, a struggling Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, a struggling Danny Green, there were other options, my point. The Clippers went out and got Reggie Jackson. Derrick Rose was still available. There were dudes – Goran Dragic doesn't start for the Heat. Like, there are there are dudes available who I think the Lakers could have improved their guard situation with, and they didn't. And I think because they'd seen such positive signs from people like Green and KCP and Caruso and Talen Horton-Tucker even as somebody who could possibly provide. But come playoff time, I'd personally rather put my stock into a little bit more established players than, say, like I said, Alex Caruso or Talen Horton-Tucker.
Yeah. And I think we have to remember, too, here that we are going to get playoff LeBron and playoff AD. Like, I'm not saying LeBron and AD aren't trying, but I can't imagine they're trying quite as much as they would in the playoffs. Like, there's a different fire. I almost think they are playing to 100% right now, but the definition of 100% is just different in the playoffs. Like, they're not trying now. There's just more of a fire. There's just a wider range of emotion to play with when you're playing in the playoffs with elimination and a championship as your two possible outcomes.
Right.
And for LeBron, I almost feel like LeBron right now, with a handful of years probably to come in LA, maybe, I don't know, 5-ish, maybe a little more. I don't know. He's what, mid-30s?
Yeah, 33, 34.
Yeah, so he's probably got some years left.
He's waiting for Bronny.
Yeah, yeah, so he's got. I'm not saying he's retiring soon. I'm not even saying he's going to exit his prime soon. I'm just saying that, like, I feel like now that he's got AD, they're the 1 seed. Now that he's got the best, like, on paper, regular season, the best team he's had since Miami, like the most successful team he's had since Miami. This is his chance to kind of shut up anyone who points at his finals record. This feels like his opportunity. Like, this feels like his opportunity to, like, prove once and for all that, like, he's as good as those who know he's good say he is. He's actually the best player in the NBA. And we would both agree he's the best player of all time. The one real argument against being championships, you and I both agree that's a shallow argument. But I think my point is he's playing for a lot. And when LeBron's even playing for a little, that's scary. I mean, again, he dragged Rodney Hood to the finals and probably would have won if the Warriors weren't waiting for him. Like, I think he can drag Anthony Davis and Danny Green, etc., quite far as well. Competition is stiffer, though. I will say that. This is his first time going through the West in the playoffs, if I'm not mistaken. And that's not easy. Because that Cavaliers team only had to beat, like, the Magic and had to beat the Raptors. That was really good Raptors. Anyway, rambling. My point is, I'm not counting them out yet. I don't think you are either. But I think the best is yet to come for the bubble Lakers. It's my personal take.
Couldn't agree more. Could not agree more. Playoff LeBron's a whole different beast. And
yes.
I'm excited to see. I am slightly curious, though, about the intensity of these playoff games. This is not West or East related. This is just like, I'm very curious if the same switch is going to be able to be flipped when there's no crowd, there's no sort of normal playoff intensity. I don't know. I assume I've never been driven to a playoff game in a bus, but I assume all the fans beating on the doors and just like that atmosphere really, helps elevate the moment. And when that's not the case anymore, I wonder if that same sort of intensity is going to be there. I assume it will be, but like, I wonder.
That's absolutely true. That's totally fair. I'm very curious to see how that evolves as well. Speaking about the Lakers, though, I think there's one team we both love to touch on that has been really interesting. I think one of the cooler storylines, one of the more impressive storylines in basketball this year that the Lakers just recently lost to pretty handedly is the Oklahoma City Thunder. What an intriguing team they've built. Like, over the last several years, they've given up KD, they've given up Paul George, and they've given up Russell Westbrook. Probably the 3 best players that organization has ever had, period. Maybe Ray Allen when they were the Sonics.
Yeah, if you're going Sonics, yeah, man. Gary Payton may have something to say about that, but yeah, it's all fair.
Right. The best 3 players to ever put on OKC uniforms.
Undoubtedly.
Yes. And it's not even close because Chris Paul is in their tier, but he's old. So he's not – I don't think he right now is as, like, raw, purely talented as any of those guys was when wearing an Oklahoma City jersey. That being said, all this to say, they've done all that, brought Chris Paul in now, put a roster with him. They've built a young, intriguing roster, and they've been about as good as they were last year, if not
better.
slightly
If not better. Yeah.
They're in conversation for potentially even the 3 seed. More so the 4 seed, but they're there. They're right there in that 4, 5, 6, 7 range. They're right on I mean, the fact that the Rockets now have Russell Westbrook and Harden and Chris Paul, the older guy in this scenario by a long shot, ends up in OKC, and they're like the same team right now, record-wise, is incredible. And I guess I have to ask you, are you crediting this, if you had gun to your head, you had to pick one of these options, are you crediting this renaissance in Oklahoma City to Chris Paul, to Billy Donovan, or to young pieces filling their potential?
It's obviously some combination thereof. But if I'm choosing one, Chris Paul. I think Chris Paul has been phenomenal this season. He has been. I think we really did Chris Paul dirty in Houston. I really do. Looking back on that time of his, he was still efficient. He was still a solid player. He maybe got exposed on the defensive end a little bit more than we were used to. But I think we all, as a basketball community, kind of piled dirt on his grave way too early. This is still just, this is the point guard of our generation. He is an exceptional talent who has the ability to elevate those around him. And that really is what he's done in OKC. I think it's such a well put together team in a lot of ways. They're still lacking that wing. They're still lacking that 6'8" wing defender, but like everything else they have said, Gallinari fits so well on that team. Steven Adams, Gallinari and Steven Adams, that pairing just makes so much sense. Like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Chris Paul, that's just a natural, nice pairing in a lot of ways. That's kind of what you say for a little bit more shooting from SGA. Like that's just such a perfect 1-2 punch from your guards. Like they have really, and like you said with Billy Donovan, I don't think he's getting enough credit. Kind of secretly under the radar, and the coaches voted on their coach of the year. It was definitely Billy Donovan, and I think it was Budenholzer. I think were the two they chose, and I don't think any Billy Donovan was getting any credit for NBA Coach of the Year, but his fellow coaches are recognizing the type of job he has done, and it's time for the rest of the NBA community to as well.
Absolutely. I mean, what he's done with this team is incredible. I mean, like you can't have a roster like this with, I'm not going to say lacking talent, but lacking proven talent. Yeah. And you can't have a roster like this that's lacking proven talent and have them play this well and it not be a majority on the coaching. And I think more so the majority on the leadership, and that ties Billy Donovan and Chris Paul. Because I don't know Chris Paul personally, believe it or not. But from everything I can tell, from everything that other people have said about him, that I hear about him in the press, how he carries himself on TV and the news, etc., he seems like one of the best guys in the league. Just one of the best people, a smart person, a hard worker, a caring person, someone who wants to see his team succeed, who clearly can handle not being in the spotlight, or else, who knows how this year would have turned out, if he needed to have Harden level, Kawhi level, LeBron level spotlight. Not that he garners it anymore, not that he's quite that level of pure talent. But my point is, when you look at Chris Paul, he seems like the perfect leader for a team with this much potential. Because I don't look at anybody on that team and think that guy is great now. But I know when I look at each one individually, that guy can be really good in his prime. And they're getting there earlier than they should have. And I think this is a lot about leadership, knowing what it takes to win as a team, and not just Chris Paul being a good player. And I have a take for you in that regard. And I'm curious to see what you say in response. Chris Paul is the Larry Fitzgerald of the NBA.
Whoa! Please go on. Yeah, continue that.
Forgetting the only difference I see is that Chris Paul played for different teams. If Chris Paul stays in one place his whole career, the take fits better. But everyone in the NFL, you hear all the time talking about how Larry Fitzgerald is one of just the purest dudes, just the nicest dudes, great guy, does a lot for his community, does a lot for the league, does a lot for his team, looks out for the young guys. Like, this is like just a widely known, widely respected character in the league. And he's been around forever. He's been great forever. He's still probably a top 50 receiver in the NFL, which in the NFL is saying a lot more than being a top 10 point guard, or say it's the equivalent, when there's so many receivers. Case in point being that they've both been near the top echelon of the league at their position for like a decade or longer. And they've never really gotten theirs. They've never really, they've been in the limelight as individuals. Like they've gotten praise, but like, when has either of them really gotten that? Like obviously they've never won a championship. Neither player has won a title. Am I wrong? I look at those two dudes and I see guys who have done so much for their teams, so much for their league, and have been good for literally our entire lifetimes, basically, as sports fans. And I see them as very comparable to each other.
And I think what's so great about that take, Jeff, is that it works on so many different levels. I think, and the most unique one, or the one you didn't mention, is the fact is how both those players are respected so much by their own league mates. I think we see an NFL top 100, or in the way that the NBA players rank themselves, is that even when analytically minded sort of analysts kind of said, "Oh, these dudes' careers are over, this is done," the NBA and NFL players are still like, "No, these guys are elite. These guys never left. These guys are the cream of the crop. It doesn't matter if they're a couple years older. Their minds are so far from what the rest of us are doing. Their intellect is just at a whole different level, and it's going to serve them so well later in the career." And like you just said with Chris Paul, I think the type of leadership we've seen from him this season has been instrumental in their rise. And no, I don't think any other point guard in modern NBA history could have organized this type of team-wide sort of resurgence like Chris Paul has.
I absolutely agree. Spot on. I don't think I have anything else to add on that topic. I think it's fun to compare the two of those dudes, just as good, respectable guys. But I totally agree. I think we're on the same page. I think one other thing you and I tend to be on the same page about is who we want to see at the 8 seed. I know as a Lakers fan, you don't want to see this, but we both want playoff Dame. I think the Pellies and Grizz would both be fun to see make the playoffs because there's so much potential there. But I'm good with sacrificing playoff Zion and playoff Ja for a year or two to get more out of this Portland team, personally. I think they're equipped to do it. They have the schedule down the stretch. They have enough games they can win to jump ahead of the Grizzlies into the 8. They're already in the 9 seed right now. And I think at the end of the day, I don't see any of these other teams when in an elimination game. I don't see, especially if the Blazers rise into an 8 seed ahead of the Grizzlies and they only need to win 1 and whoever they play needs to win 2. I don't see anyone beating this team twice in elimination games.
No, I couldn't agree more. I think, playoff Dame is by far the most talented player out of that grouping of teams that we just listed. He's the only player capable of carrying a team, to through a series. I don't think he's capable of carrying a team to a beat of a 1 seed, but I think he is capable of captaining a team come playoff time. And this is debatably the most help he's ever had. CJ McCollum looks just as good as ever. Zach Collins has taken another step. Yusuf Nurkic looks fully healthy. And we poured dirt on his grave, but Carmelo Anthony is back, baby.
Yes.
Carmelo Anthony, Syracuse great, is here. And everyone who called his career over looks incredibly dumb, me included. It's Melo time.
People forget that Carmelo Anthony, in a bracket-style poll run by the Atlantic Coast Conference, was voted the greatest ACC player of all time. Yes.
People forget
that it was an all Cuse Final Four because the Cuse fans just filled the ballot box. But Carmelo Anthony won, and he's the best ACC player of all time. And now he's killing it for the Blazers. Had a game, not a game winner, but like a game-sealing shot just a couple nights ago. He's back. And he's back in the way that he needed to be. He's not a number 1. He's back in the way we've been saying for years. If he wants to find a niche in his current part of his career, it's as a big shot maker and a good role player behind young stars. And here he is. That's awesome to see.
This is the Melo we thought we were getting in Houston. Alongside Chris Paul and James Harden. This is who we thought we were getting, and he just needed a couple of years to figure himself out, clearly. He needed some time. He needed some time off from the game and some time, I don't know, working in the gym. Whatever he needed, he got. Because what he is in Portland is what we missed out on in Houston and in OKC, and now we're getting in spades, and it is so fun to watch. Because, this is the most talented team Melo has been on in years. It's not his best shot at a championship, but like I just said, it's his most talented team. It fits him really well, and I can't wait to see what it looks like come playoff time. Because this feels like the best 1-8 matchup we will have in a long time. If it ends up being Portland Lakers, I think it's going to be epic. I think minimum 6 games. I think that would just be an absolutely epic first round.
Yeah, it'll be a little bit better of a 1-8 than Bucks Magic, but.
Hey, don't hate on the Magic. Markelle Fultz, okay? Kem Birch fan club right here.
Kem Birch, what a name. But in talking about this 8 seed race, we could do another half hour on how screwed the Grizzlies got and how much the Pelicans have wasted an opportunity by losing to the Kings. The Pelicans, they have the easiest schedule in the world and lost to the Kings. But, and this makes you and I both so mad, what the heck, Suns? What? Stop it. Stop. You're bending reality. I need this to stop. It's not okay.
I need a return to the normal universe where Suns fans are tortured and Devin Booker is overrated. And I don't want to live in this world where Devin Booker is actually a top 10 NBA player. I can't have Suns fans be this right.
And of course I kid. Of course I joke. But this has been wild. Like, it's been like, I don't want to say it's been the most, like, not talked about because it's been talked about. Trust me. But it feels like it's still flying a little under the radar. Because I don't think any of us, not that we don't want to believe it, but we're not ready to believe it. Because we still think, like, okay, they have a hard schedule. They're probably not – they need to win a couple more games at least to sneak into the 9 seed. Portland's got an easier schedule. It's probably not going to happen. But still wild to see that they actually have a shot halfway through the bubble.
It is a testament to Monty Williams. It is a testament to the team that they have built, I think, because that is the ethos of the Suns, right? They look better on paper. They look better on paper than they do in reality. And it's finally the team that we thought they could be has finally come to fruition. Somebody said on Twitter, take them out of Old Town Scottsdale, and we finally see the full potential Suns. It's time. So, no, Mikal Bridges has been awesome. I think that's been kind of the least talked about, or least talked about outside of Suns bubble. Maybe development of the year. He has really turned into an elite wing defender who does a lot of nice things offensively. I don't know, if you're picking most improved, it's there are definitely players who have taken more substantial leaps, but players who've gone from role player from unrecognizable role player to like important, crucial member of their team, there may be no bigger jump than Mikal Bridges.
I absolutely agree.
I hope they make that 9 seed. I hope a Portland-Phoenix 8-9 matchup would be a whole lot of fun.
That would be super wild. I think Portland wins it for sure, but when up against the wall, like Devin Booker's never played a playoff game, and I just think the fact that Dame has, it's over. I don't know. I don't see a world in which Dame loses to any of these teams. To any of these teams that are vying for a spot. We could go on. Like I said, we could go on about New Orleans and Memphis, but I think their time will come. I think Phoenix's time will come too. I think they're all 3 of those teams are trending the right direction. But I think we're getting a little long here. I don't know if there's any specific things you had left that you want to discuss in these seeding games. One quick thing: are you worried about Dallas?
Ooh, worried about. I think they have some. The loss of Dwight Powell, to me, is probably the least talked about injury this NBA season, but is one of the most impactful. I think he was such a nice compliment to Kristaps. He played off Luka so well. He was this perfect kind of rim running 5 that just fit what they did so well. And the loss of him was just crushing. It changes the entire chemistry of that team. It was a massive blow that pinged me as someone who is a Luka believer. I don't know. I don't know if there's a Luka non-believers out there, but like I don't know. Luka in his second. I believe Luka could have been the best player in a playoff series right now. You know what I mean? With a perfect team around him, and that's what he kind of had. He had a perfect team around him with an awesome coach, Rick Carlisle, who could bring out the best of what he does well. And I don't know, they would have been such a fun matchup come playoff time. But Dwight Powell, it's sad that someone of Dwight Powell's caliber is affecting such a intense that he affects their ceiling so much. But it speaks to the importance that he had on that team.
Yeah, absolutely. We've already seen it in the bubble. They haven't had that edge. They haven't had that click that they had in the regular season, where we saw night in and night out, like you said, Luka being brought up to his potential and Luka having the opportunity to play to his potential in any game in the regular season. And it just hasn't looked the same in these seeding games. So I think I expect them to go out with a whimper in the playoffs. Maybe they're probably going to play the Clippers, and I think 6 games max. 5.
We saw last night. It's two talented teams, but the Clippers are substantially more talented and just have more horses. The Mavericks are not able to exploit the weaknesses of the Clippers like other teams could.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much the last thing I had. I mean, there's so many things we can discuss right now. It's just beautiful to have this sport back.
It is. Thank you, Adam Silver, for being a competent commissioner. You are. It is few and far between, clearly, but thank you, Lord. We appreciate it.
It's been a blast. I mean, the first day we had a full day of games, I just texted Jacob and I'm like, we're talking basketball, and then I just had to stop and be like, how fun is this? It's 2:30 on a Friday, and we're talking hoops. It's awesome.
Beautiful. Nature is healing, Jeff. Nature is healing.
Right now, it's Friday, August 7th at 3 o'clock. And right now, as we speak, the Spurs and Jazz are playing. And the score is 98-86 Spurs with 9:40 to go in the fourth. Bet you didn't know that, Jacob.
I had no idea. Breaking news right here on the Sideline Intel NBA podcast.
You heard it here first. The Spurs are up in the fourth quarter. As of the time that you already will not have – as of the time that will have much passed by the time you hear this podcast. But it's worth noting the Spurs are doing something right.
It's breaking news to us.
Exactly. To half our viewership. That being said, we've talked about the Spurs. And DeMar DeRozan, I feel so bad for the guy. That's a whole other thing we can talk about. What a raw deal he's gotten. But it's good to see them winning today against the Jazz.
Proud of them.
Quite proud. Anyway, we've gone a lot of different topics today, Jacob. I think we've hit a lot of interesting things. It's been good to be back talking basketball with you. Any final thoughts before we let this one go? We'll be back, obviously, for another episode probably next week or so. But final thoughts today, Friday, August 7th.
I'm just, like you just said, I'm just happy basketball's back. I think we're learning so much about these teams in the bubble. This is basketball heaven right now. This is basketball without all the pomp and circumstance. It's just real hoopers have come to hoop, and I love it.
I couldn't have said it better myself. I absolutely agree. Last question for you, though. If you had to clear your schedule for 1 2.5 hour period this weekend, which game are you making sure you have your eyes on?
Ooh, this weekend. You're putting me on the spot with some NBA schedule. Let's see. Let's see the upcoming games. I think if I'm clearing my schedule, if I am you know who I'm watching? We're gonna tap back into 2 teams that we have been very high on this podcast. I'm tuning in to Suns Heat, baby. I am ready for that matchup. I am ready to see Devin Booker drop 50. Wow. Kendrick Nunn and Kelly Olynyk just ball. That is my own personal heaven, Jeff. Right there.
I like it. I'm excited for you to watch that game. I'm really excited for you.
Thank you. Did you have a game in mind? Was that a
I did. I mean, I'm looking forward to the Sixers game tonight. Looking forward to see how poorly they play against the Magic. Boston Toronto is going to be fun tonight. But if I had to pick one, it's so tough to really narrow it down. But I think I'm going to go to Saturday, and I'm going to say Clippers-Blazers at 1 o'clock. I think the Clippers have had some chinks in the armor in the bubble. They've played to their potential. They've played perfectly fine. But I'm curious to see how these hot Blazers perform against a team of that caliber. We obviously, we've seen them have their chances so far in the bubble, and I'm excited to see another step in what Portland can be heading into the playoffs. So that's kind of my game to watch this weekend. I won't be able to. I'm busy, but I'll be following.
We'll be watching. That's great to hear, Jeff. It's a great point. And a beautiful weekend of basketball ahead of us.
Very excited to be back on the podcast. Again, as we wrap up, make sure you're following along on sidelineintel.com. Follow Twitter at sidelineintel, at sideline.intel on Instagram. Catch us on Facebook as well. Just look up the name. If you're listening to this podcast, you probably know how to use social media, so you know where to look. But we hope you'll keep following us. We're going to be available on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on our website, on YouTube. So plenty of ways to consume this content. But we hope you'll follow along. We hope you enjoyed this first episode. Jacob, did you enjoy this first episode?
Very much, Jeff. So happy to be back. And like you just said, follow Sideline Intel. We are pumping out good content, unique content. That's just what we do here at Sideline Intel. And so, follow along in this journey that we're all taking.
It is a blast from the past, and it's been a good time. We'll catch you guys soon with episode 2. Until then, enjoy the basketball.